I never thought a quiet Monday morning could change my entire life. Texas sunlight slipped through the glass pane, landing on my familiar desk where my mug, white ceramic with the words Finance Never Sleeps, still bore a faint coffee ring from the day before. I'd come in early as usual, savoring the silence before the office filled with the clatter of keyboards and obligatory small talk. Leah, the junior analyst I'd mentored for 2 years, appeared at my door. Rachel, could you help me check the budget projection for next quarter? I think the format might have broken. I smiled, nodded, and opened the file she sent. A heavy Excel sheet titled Budget Projections, .xlsx. I skimmed through a few formulas. She'd gotten much better. But when I scrolled to the bottom, I noticed a hidden tab. Out of habit, or maybe curiosity, I clicked it. The label read Compensation FY 2025. I almost closed it immediately, but my eyes froze on a number that didn't make sense. Base salary, $172,500. Recipient, Leah Harper. Must be an error, I thought. But as I scrolled down, familiar names appeared. Marcus, 1 year of experience, $168,000. Hannah, 6 months in, $175,200. Then I looked for mine, slowly, like someone bracing for bad news. Rachel Monroe, Senior Financial Analyst, $114,000. I stared at the number, then at the names above it. Every single one of them had been trained by me. I was the one who walked them through audit protocols, who rewrote the reporting process they still used every day. 10 years. 10 years of late nights, salvaging overdue projects, fixing other people's mistakes. And now, the newcomers, barely 2 years in, were paid nearly 50% more. I did what every finance professional does when they don't trust a data set. I verified it. I checked the payroll logs, HR cost reports, and salary increase history. No display glitch, no hidden formulas, just truth. I leaned back in my chair, inhaling deeply. The hum of the air conditioner filled the sterile room. Across the floor, Leah was laughing with Marcus, bright, carefree, untouched by the weight of unfairness. I didn't blame them. They hadn't done anything wrong. They were simply thriving in a system that believed newcomers were worth more than loyalty. I stood up, my heels clicking softly against the wood floor. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with photos from the company's early years. I remembered when Horizon Dynamics had only 8 employees and one sputtering coffee machine. I'd been there when the firm nearly lost its biggest contract, and I was the one who caught the accounting error that saved them from a lawsuit. Back then, CEO Charles shook my hand and said, "Rachel, you're the backbone of this company." 10 years later, that backbone was being compensated like a replaceable part. Back at my desk, my hands trembled slightly. I opened a new email to HR, ready to ask about the mistaken spreadsheet. Then I deleted it. They'd just call it a market adjustment policy. I'd heard that phrase too many times. I powered down my laptop and looked out the window. Austin gleamed under the morning sun, but to me, it all looked dull. Something new stirred in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. Cold, sharp, undeniable clarity. I'd let other people define my worth for far too long. My phone buzzed. A message from Leah. "Thanks, Rachel. I'll fix the file." "Oh, and did you see that last tab? I think HR accidentally attached it." I stared at the message, then typed back slowly. "Yeah, I saw it. Don't worry about it. Keep working." When I set my phone down, a thought flashed through my mind. Small, but razor sharp. I wouldn't stay silent. Not this time. Not after 10 years. Outside, the sunlight kept pouring through the glass, glinting off the open spreadsheet. The number 114,000 stared back at me, steady, unapologetic. And for the first time in years, I felt myself changing. That morning, when I clicked on a hidden Excel tab by accident, I didn't realize I'd just lit the fuse that would blow open everything Horizon Dynamics had tried to hide for years. I spent the rest of the morning in a fog, half working, half drifting. I still replied to emails, still adjusted numbers in the monthly report, pretending nothing had happened. But every time I saw the name Ethan Cole in an approval thread, something in my chest tightened. Ethan had been my direct manager for 6 years, the same man who once told me I was his right hand. I remembered those late nights when we stayed in the office past midnight, closing quarter end books, when he talked about his son learning to walk, and I just smiled, nodding like a friend. That afternoon, while everyone headed down to the cafeteria, I stayed behind. I knew I couldn't push it aside. I took a deep breath and knocked on Ethan's door. The frosted glass reflected my pale face, dark circles under my eyes. Inside, Ethan was on the phone, laughing. When he saw me, he held up a finger, asking me to wait. I stood there silently, listening to him chat about a weekend golf trip with his executive buddies. "Rachel, come in. What's going on?" he said after hanging up. His voice was light, friendly, like I'd come to ask something trivial. I set my laptop on the desk and opened the tab that had haunted me all morning. "Can you explain this?" I asked, calm but dry. He leaned over the screen. I saw his eyes narrow, then relax almost instantly. "Oh, that. Rachel, you shouldn't have seen internal documents like this. They're not for staff." "I know. It was sent by mistake and my name was in it. I just want to understand why the people I trained are getting paid 50% more than I am." Ethan sighed and leaned back. "Rachel, the market changes fast. New hires are brought in at competitive market rates. You joined 10 years ago. Different economy, different benchmarks. You know how it works." "So loyalty means nothing now?" He shrugged. "I wouldn't say that, but the company has to stay practical. You've had consistent raises every year, right? You just got a 3% bump last quarter. That's fair." I looked at him without speaking. Ethan avoided my gaze, turning toward the window where the downtown buildings shimmered in the heat. "If you're unhappy, maybe consider other opportunities," he said softly, almost kindly. "No one wants you to leave, but both sides should feel comfortable." My throat burned. He said it so casually, as if I were just another average employee, not the person who'd helped him get where he was. I tried to steady my voice. "You once said I was your right hand." "You're still valuable," Ethan replied, smiling faintly. "But sometimes change is good, Rachel, for everyone." I stood up and closed my laptop. "Thanks for your honesty." He nodded, like I'd just agreed to update a small project. "Of course, I knew you'd understand." As I stepped out, I heard his chair swivel and the faint tapping of keys resuming behind me. He was already back to work, as if the conversation had never happened. I walked down the hallway, staring at the slogan framed on the wall: integrity, innovation, respect. I used to believe every word. Now, they were just decoration. Back at my desk, I reopened the budget file, but the numbers blurred into meaningless shapes. I closed my laptop and sat still, watching sunlight spill across the table. A strange calm settled over me. Not anger, but a hollow quiet that comes when disappointment has burned itself out. I had spent a decade building what they now took for granted. I'd believed that hard work and loyalty would eventually be recognized. But that afternoon, in that glass office, I realized the only thing they truly valued was compliance. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note. The first line I typed was, "The Price of Loyalty." I didn't know why I chose that title, only that once I started writing, I wouldn't stop. From the conference room down the hall came the sound of laughter, muffled through the glass, carried by the cold air of the vents. I didn't turn back. I knew from that moment on, I was no longer the woman they'd known for the past 10 years. I got home late that night, just like every other night, but this time I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, the glow from my laptop screen casting faint light across my face. My small apartment in South Austin was unnervingly quiet. No cars, no voices, just the slow, steady ticking of the wall clock, like a heartbeat trying to stay calm. I opened a new file and typed the title, "The Price of Loyalty." The words appeared, sharp and still. I stared at them for a long time before I started typing. I wrote about my first day at Horizon Dynamics, when the office had only a few old desks and a printer that needed 3 hard taps before it worked. I wrote about 2016, when the company nearly collapsed because of a tax reporting error, and I was the one who caught the flaw in the software, saving them from a $3 million penalty. I wrote about the hundreds of nights I stayed late after everyone had gone home, the building dark except for my screen. Each sentence appeared with the precision of the numbers I'd worked with for years. But this time, I wasn't calculating profits. I was calculating worth, my own. I listed every project I'd led, every system I rebuilt from scratch, every mistake I caught before it became a disaster. I dug through old emails from clients thanking me, audit recognitions, and even messages from Ethan saying, "Rachel, you saved us again." I put everything into a timeline, year by year, quarter by quarter, contribution by contribution. When the clock struck midnight, I was still typing. I didn't feel tired. If anything, I felt alive. Maybe because for the first time in years, I wasn't working for them. I was working for myself. I remembered my fourth year at Horizon when I proposed automating the expense reporting process to reduce manual errors. Ethan had dismissed it, saying it wasn't necessary. 6 months later, he presented the exact idea in an executive meeting and took all the credit. I hadn't said a word. Back then, I thought silence was wisdom. Now I saw it for what it was: permission. I scrolled back to the first page and added a single line at the bottom. Silence is a form of complicity. By 2 in the morning, I stopped typing and looked at the final summary. In the past 3 years alone, my process improvements have saved the company nearly $3.2 million. I opened another sheet, calculating the pay gap between my salary and the department's average. The number appeared 52%. I wasn't surprised. I just felt light, as if the truth had finally spoken for me, not with words, but with evidence. I printed everything and bound the pages into a thick 50-page report. On the cover, in black ink, I wrote, "The Price of Loyalty, a 10-year financial review by Rachel Monroe." I didn't plan to send it to anyone, not yet. I poured myself a glass of red wine, left over from last Christmas, and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the city glimmered peacefully, as if nothing in it was breaking. But inside me, everything was shifting. I was no longer the woman who sat quietly in that cold office, waiting for fairness to find her. I was waking up. Before shutting down, I reopened the salary sheet from that morning. My name was still on row 14. Base pay, $114,000. I looked at the number, and for once, it didn't hurt. I just thought, my real value isn't on this spreadsheet, and soon they'll know that. I saved the file in a locked folder, then leaned back. On the screen, the title, "The Price of Loyalty," still glowed, its reflection trembling in the red wine. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt myself walking, if only in thought, away from the place that had held me for far too long. What I didn't know was that by reopening those old records, I had just touched the very numbers Horizon Dynamics had been hiding for years. 2 days later, when I returned to the office, everything looked the same: the hum of printers, the smell of coffee, scattered chatter about upcoming vacations. But in my head, there was a new rhythm, steady, focused. I wasn't working as an employee anymore. I was working as an investigator. I reopened the internal database, not to finish a report, but to examine the payment records I'd skimmed past 1,000 times without thinking. When you do the same job for years, everything turns into a habit. But that day, I looked at every number differently, not with trust, but with suspicion. The first line that made me stop was a payment of $18,600 to a vendor named Summit Consulting, LLC. The name sounded legitimate enough, but when I cross-checked it against our approved vendor list, it wasn't there. I looked it up in the federal tax registry. No such company existed under that ID. I pulled a few more entries. Clearview Services, Pine Hill Partners, same pattern. P.O. Box addresses, no websites, no phone numbers. I opened the payment history again and noticed something strange. Every quarter, on the 14th, there was a nearly identical transaction, just a few $100s different each time. The amounts were small enough to avoid audit triggers, yet consistent enough to be intentional. The final approver on each transaction was Ethan. The legal verification line bore one name: Lydia Grant. I leaned back, a chill spreading up my spine from the cold wooden floor. Ethan and Lydia, the two people with the most authority in finance and legal. If they were in on this, it wasn't an error, it was a system. I took out my phone, screenshot every transaction, every signature. I saved the images to an external drive and uploaded an encrypted backup to an anonymous cloud. I knew it was risky, but silence was riskier. That afternoon, I went to the data archive to dig up printed payment reports from 3 years ago. As I flipped through the pages, a pattern emerged. The same vendors, the same vague notes. Consulting fee. Executive approval. I remembered, years ago, when I was still new, I once asked Ethan about those payments. He laughed and said, "Leadership approved it. Don't worry about it." And I hadn't. Now I sat on the floor surrounded by stacks of paper, feeling both foolish and frighteningly awake. These weren't just numbers anymore. They were tracks, money trails, carved carefully quarter after quarter, year after year, unnoticed by everyone. I grabbed a notepad and started listing totals by year. When I added them all up, my breath caught. Nearly $2.8 million had disappeared over 3 years, with no documented services rendered. When my laptop screen went black from a low battery, I saw my reflection in it. I thought of Ethan, his smooth smile when he'd told me to consider other options. I thought of Lydia, who'd sent me a sugary congratulatory email last year, her words as sweet as syrup and just as cold. Now I understand. They weren't afraid of my ambition. They were afraid of my access. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of files. The room was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. I reopened my laptop and entered the data into a new sheet, building a graph of the money flowing through those phantom accounts. The data points connected like a web, precise, deliberate, seamless. I saved the file under the name Anomalies Pattern RM. Then I created a second, encrypted copy and sent it to a hidden backup server. Before shutting down, I wrote one line in my notebook. No one audits the auditor. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The fear was there, rising like a tide, but beneath it, something else was growing. A cold, steady calm I'd never felt before. I knew I'd just touched something they'd do anything to keep buried. But once you've seen the truth, you can't pretend you haven't. In my mind, I heard Ethan's smooth voice again. If you're unhappy, maybe consider other opportunities. I opened my eyes, staring at the dark screen. I'm considering it, Ethan, I whispered. Just not the way you think. 3 days later, I sat in a small cafe on Austin's east side, my laptop open to the same spreadsheet that had become hauntingly familiar. I wasn't counting lines of money anymore. I was reading a story written in data, signatures, and the silence of powerful people. I knew what I needed to do next, but for the first time in my life, I knew I couldn't do it alone. One name kept echoing in my mind: Maya Torres. In the halls of Horizon Dynamics, Maya's name was spoken with a strange mix of respect and caution. She'd been the company's first female CFO, sharp, fearless, unwilling to play politics. 5 years ago, she'd left suddenly. Ethan had said she didn't fit the leadership culture, but I'd always felt there was something darker behind that. Later, I heard she'd founded Orion Capital, a rival firm growing fast enough to make Horizon nervous. I searched my old contacts and found her email from a long-forgotten project. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I sent, I believe we share something in common, and I think you'll want to see this. Rachel Monroe. I didn't expect her to reply, but less than an hour later, a message appeared. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Ember Coffee, East 6th Street. Bring what you mentioned. The next morning, I arrived early. Ember Coffee smelled of roasted beans and burnt wood, warm light spilling over low ceilings. I chose a corner table and laid the file in front of me. When the door opened, I recognized her immediately. Maya looked just like the photos. Dark hair tied back, quick eyes that missed nothing. She wore a white shirt, no jewelry, just a silver watch. Rachel Monroe, she said, her tone equal parts greeting and verification. I'm guessing you know why I'm here. I have a few guesses, she replied, taking a seat, but I'd rather hear it from you. I opened the file and spread out the first few pages: payment logs, vendor lists, cash flow maps. Maya glanced over them, then leaned closer. When I reached the section with Lydia Grant and Ethan Cole's signatures, her mouth curved. Not surprised, just confirmed. I knew they were into something, she said quietly, almost to herself. I found a similar pattern 4 years ago. When I asked questions, they shut me out of finance meetings. A month later, I was forced out for violating internal approval protocol. They weren't just stealing money, Rachel. They built an entire framework to protect the theft. I looked at her. Do you have proof? She shook her head. Back then, I didn't have full system access, but you do. She lifted her gaze, eyes sharp. You can prove what I couldn't. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away, to go back to my desk, pretend I'd never seen any of it. But another part, the one that had been quietly bruised for years, knew I couldn't. What do you plan to do with the data? She asked. I'm going to the CEO, Charles Donovan. He's the only one not involved. I still trust him. Maya gave a small, knowing smile. Trust is good, but be ready for him to choose the company over the truth. Do you have a contingency plan? I do. Everything's encrypted and backed up on 3 separate servers. If I don't log in within 72 hours, an automatic release is triggered. She chuckled softly, half admiring, half sad. Now I understand why they're afraid of you. Around us, people laughed and chatted, unaware that 2 women in the corner were discussing evidence that could bring down an entire corporation. Maya leaned closer, voice low but steady. Rachel, I have an offer. When this is over, whatever happens, I want you at Orion Capital. We need people like you. But first, let me help. I have lawyers, contacts at the Securities Commission. If you expose this, do it right. Not for revenge. For truth they can't rewrite. I nodded. I'm not looking for revenge. I just want justice. Justice, she repeated, her tone softening. Be careful. It's rarely as clean as we hope. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, rain began to fall, drawing thin streaks across the window. I looked at Maya, the woman who'd been cast out for daring to ask the right questions, and realized my future was reflected in her eyes. There was no anger there, only the quiet resolve of someone who'd lost too much to still be afraid. When she stood to leave, she placed a hand on my shoulder. Rachel, if you go through with this, remember, they'll fight back. It won't just be deleted files. They'll try to erase you, your credibility, your name. But if you're prepared, they can't win. I gripped the file tighter. I spent 10 years building them a financial system that couldn't collapse. I think I know how to make it crack. She smiled. Good. Then start by making them believe you're still the same woman. When I stepped out of the cafe, the rain had turned heavy. I pulled my coat close and walked through the wet streets, feeling as though I'd crossed into another territory, one where every step could make the ground tremble. I wasn't the quiet analyst behind a keyboard anymore. I was the woman holding the secret that could decide the fate of a corporation. That night, I reopened The Price of Loyalty and added a new section, Horizon Dynamics, Fraud Review. Beneath it, I typed the first line, Every empire begins to fall the moment it believes no one will speak the truth. And I knew that tomorrow I would start speaking. Monday morning, I walked into Horizon Dynamics with a different kind of calm. No more feeling trapped behind a keyboard. No more fear of judgmental eyes. I felt like someone stepping onto a stage, every movement already planned. People greeted me as usual, polite smiles, idle weekend chatter. No one knew that inside my bag was something that could erase the very system they were standing on. I arrived earlier than usual. Before 7, Charles Donovan, the CEO, hadn't come in yet. I went straight to the 19th floor, where his office overlooked the city. The hallway was quiet, the golden lights reflecting off the polished wood floor. The office door was slightly open. His assistant, Marcy, wasn't there yet. I stepped in and placed 3 things neatly on his desk. A white envelope marked resignation in my handwriting, a thick black-bound report, The Price of Loyalty, and a shorter file, Fraud Review, containing the transactions I'd uncovered. I didn't leave a note. I just stood there for a moment, looking around the silent office as the early sunlight touched the glass wall behind the desk. Austin was waking up. I took a deep breath and walked out. Within 2 hours, the whispers began. Rachel Monroe quit. People murmured, speculated. Some even smirked, the kind of smirk from those who think you've just stepped away from their idea of safety. Leah passed by my desk, worry in her eyes. Rachel, is it true? You're really leaving? I smiled. Yeah, it's just time. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't. By noon, Ethan showed up beside my desk, smiling as if nothing had changed. Rachel, I heard you're leaving. Can we talk privately for a moment? I followed him into a small conference room. He closed the door, turned his chair, and spoke in that calm, measured tone of his. You know, I'm sorry to see you go. You've always been valuable, but if there was any misunderstanding about salary or bonuses, you could have talked to me first. No need to. His eyes flicked toward my bag. Make a scene. I met his gaze. I didn't make a scene. I told the truth. He gave a thin smile. Truth can be dangerous, Rachel. You know that. And silence helps who exactly? I asked. He shrugged. It keeps people employed, keeps the company alive, keeps you out of legal trouble, for example. The tone was light. The threat wasn't. When I left the room, he was still sitting there, that cold smile fixed in place. By the end of the day, I understood what he meant. An email from HR hit my inbox. Notice of security policy violation. Employee Rachel Monroe is under investigation for unauthorized access and data extraction. The news spread faster than any company memo. Some coworkers avoided my eyes. Others quietly gathered their papers when I walked by, afraid proximity might stain them. By late afternoon, Lydia Grant posted a message on the company intranet. We remain committed to protecting data integrity and client confidentiality. Any unauthorized access will be dealt with accordingly. My name wasn't in it, but everyone knew. That night, my hands trembled as I opened my laptop. Waiting in my inbox was a chain of emails from legal@horizon.com. Formal threats demanding I cease all unlawful activity immediately. I didn't respond. I simply logged into my private server to confirm my backups were still intact, triple encrypted, time-stamped on blockchain. Even if they wiped everything inside Horizon, the originals were beyond their reach. As I stared at the screen, fear crept in for the first time, not for my job or my reputation, but because I finally understood. They wouldn't stop. Ethan and Lydia had caught the scent. And people who live by deception don't face the truth. They destroy it. That night, Leah called. Her voice was shaky. Rachel, I need to tell you something. I just saw Lydia in the main database. She's deleting the old payment files. Your access logs are gone too. They're trying to clean it all up. I paused. Can you send me proof? I took screenshots, but if they find out, they won't. Send them tonight. An hour later, the images arrived. Lydia in her office, the monitor behind her showing the files being deleted one by one. I saved everything, compressing it into a new folder. Evidence. Sequence. 6. When Leah asked quietly, "What are you going to do now?" I simply said, "Don't worry, I've been preparing for this for a long time." I shut down my computer and leaned back, staring out the window at the city lights glittering against the dark. The streets moved as usual, but inside those glass towers, power and fear were at war. I knew their game. They thought I was alone, that a single employee couldn't survive their legal pressure. But they forgot one thing. Every system leaves a trace, and I built this one. I lifted my glass, watching my reflection shimmer in the window. They want a war, I whispered. Then they'll get one. Before bed, I opened a new document titled Statement Day 0. The first line I wrote, if they want silence, they'll have to be silent because of me. Outside, the city still gleamed as if nothing had changed. But I knew that by morning, when Charles opened the envelope on his desk, Horizon Dynamics would never be the same again. The next morning, I arrived at the office right at 8. No one greeted me. No friendly smiles. The air on our floor was so heavy it could have been cut with a knife. I knew the rumors had spread: HR, legal, maybe even the board. Every step I took down the silent hallway felt like part of a countdown. At exactly 9, my desk phone rang. The screen flashed. Executive Office, C. Donovan. I lifted the receiver, my voice steady. Rachel Monroe speaking. Rachel, this is Charles. We need to meet. Right now, conference room, 19th floor. Of course, I said. I'm on my way. The hallway upstairs gleamed under bright fluorescent light, the polished floor reflecting every movement. The door to the conference room closed automatically behind me. Inside sat not just Charles Donovan, the CEO, but also Ethan Cole, Lydia Grant, and 3 others I didn't recognize. A gray-haired man in a tailored suit, definitely outside counsel, and 2 people from internal audit. The tension was suffocating. Charles stood, forcing a polite smile. Rachel, thank you for coming. Have a seat. I pulled out a chair, sat across from them, and placed my notebook on the table. No one spoke for a few seconds. The low hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Lydia spoke first, her tone sharp and practiced. We've reviewed the materials you left. The fraud allegations are serious. However, we haven't found any definitive evidence to support them. In fact, your actions in accessing data outside your clearance may constitute a breach of confidentiality. Ethan nodded, pretending to sound reasonable. Rachel, I understand you're upset, but this isn't the right way to handle it. If you wanted to leave, there were proper channels. Sharing documents like that only damages everyone's credibility. I looked at them, calm. So calm it startled even me. I expected you'd say that. Lydia frowned. And what exactly do you mean by that? I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference screen. The Horizon Dynamics logo appeared, then vanished, replaced by rows of data, dates, vendor names, transaction amounts, approvers. The familiar payments filled the wall. This is Horizon's internal accounting record. Before it was deleted last night, I said, my eyes fixed on Lydia. I also have screenshots from another employee showing who performed the deletions. For the first time, Lydia's composure cracked, though only for a second. Which employee? I don't need to say, I replied. But the security cameras on the 18th floor should still be active, right? I clicked. A short video played. Lydia standing in her office, the blue glow of the monitor lighting her face as she scrolled through files, deleting them one by one. The room went dead quiet. Ethan leaned forward, voice sharp. You're crossing a line, Rachel. I'm just showing the truth, I said softly. And every file. Here is time-stamped on blockchain. It can't be edited. It can't be erased. The gray-haired lawyer cleared his throat. Do you have proof that the payments were actually unauthorized? I do. I switched slides to a flowchart. A total of $2.7 million, routed through 7 shell companies, all with the same final beneficiary, Pinecrest Holdings, a company owned by Lydia Grant's brother. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Charles turned to Lydia, his voice cold. Lydia, what is this? She kept her tone even, though her hands trembled. This must be a misunderstanding. Pinecrest was just a subcontractor. Probably a coincidence. I tilted my head. Interesting coincidence. Because the signature on Pinecrest's incorporation documents is identical to the one on your marriage license filed in Travis County, both public records. Ethan cut in, angry now. You're fabricating this. I don't have to, I said. You signed off on 31 of those payments, Ethan. Shall I project them all? He slammed a hand on the table. You're destroying this company. I'm saving it, I replied, my voice steady. If I wanted to destroy it, I wouldn't be here. I'd just let the SEC handle it, which, for the record, I already did this morning. A soft intake of breath echoed across the table. Charles froze, eyes moving from face to face, then back to me. Rachel, could you step outside for a moment, please? Of course. I closed my laptop, leaving the glowing numbers frozen on the screen, and walked out. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall. Through the glass, muffled voices rose, sharper tones, chairs scraping, a brief silence. I closed my eyes. What I felt wasn't victory, it was released. 10 years of loyalty had led me here, not for recognition, but so they could never underestimate me again. 15 minutes later, Marcy, Charles's assistant, appeared. He'd like you to come back in. When I re-entered, Lydia was staring at the floor, pale. Ethan's jaw was clenched, his eyes hollow. Charles stood tall, voice low but firm. Rachel, we've decided to open a full internal investigation immediately. Lydia and Ethan are suspended effective today. You'll work with an independent audit team to hand over all relevant data and procedures. Will you cooperate? I nodded. I will, but on one condition. He narrowed his eyes, which is, all audit results must be disclosed directly to the board. No legal department filters. I won't see these files vanish again. Charles studied me for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. I gathered my laptop and notebook. As I walked past Ethan, he looked up, hatred and fear mixed behind his eyes. I spoke quietly. You once told me to consider other options. I just did. As the door closed behind me, I heard Charles's voice. Call the board and contact the SEC. This is beyond our control now. Walked down the corridor, sunlight spilling across the floor. Inside me was a stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop letting fear make your choices. That day, I left Horizon Dynamics without realizing that the meeting would mark the beginning of an earthquake. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt free. 3 days after the meeting, the name Horizon Dynamics was everywhere in the business press. Not for a new merger, not for a breakthrough in financial tech, but for an internal investigation that sent the company's stock into free fall. It all started with an anonymous source who sent detailed financial files to the SEC and the Department of Justice. I didn't have to ask who they thought it was. Everyone knew. That Wednesday morning, I woke to dozens of missed calls, a few from reporters, some from old colleagues, and one message from Maya. Stay calm. Don't respond to anyone. They'll panic. You won't. I brewed coffee and turned on the TV. Charles Donovan was on the morning news, looking exhausted but steady. Behind him, the Horizon logo glowed faintly. His voice was calm, deliberate. We're cooperating fully with authorities to clarify the financial misconduct within our company. 2 senior executives have been suspended pending investigation. He didn't mention my name. He didn't deflect blame. He didn't hide. I turned off the TV and sat in silence. Part of me felt relief. Another part felt hollow. 10 years of my life had gone into that place, and now it was unraveling by my hand. That afternoon, Leah called. Her voice shook. Rachel, they just escorted Ethan out. Police were there. I saw it. And Lydia? Not yet. But word is she's being summoned tomorrow morning. Everyone's terrified. Legal's locked down. Servers sealed. I didn't answer. I just listened to the rain tapping against the window. Everything was moving faster than I expected. Too fast. By evening, Charles called. Rachel, I know you don't want to talk, but I wanted to thank you. Without you, we wouldn't have caught this in time. I know you've lost faith in this company, but I hope I'm not coming back, Charles. I understand. But please know, you did the right thing. I'll make sure the full audit report goes public. I paused. The right thing usually arrives late, but at least it arrives. After we hung up, I sat by the window of my quiet apartment, watching Austin's skyline flicker against the rain. I thought of everyone I'd met at Horizon, the ones who'd left quietly, the ones who stayed out of fear, and the ones like Ethan and Lydia who believed power could outlast truth. 2 weeks later, I officially left the company. On my last day, the building was nearly empty. No one spoke as I walked the hallway, just the sound of my heels echoing on the floor. Leah waited by the elevator, eyes red. You're really leaving? For now, I smiled. You'll be okay? I think so. After all this, I want to stay and do things right this time. I nodded. Then never let anyone tell you you're worth lives on a spreadsheet. The elevator doors opened. For a moment, my reflection shone in the steel, steady, unbroken. It didn't feel like failure. It felt like the right kind of ending. Across the street, Maya was waiting in her car. She rolled down the window and smiled. Welcome to the free world, I grinned. Does the free world come with a job offer? It does, she said, handing me a white envelope. And it's a good one. We sat in the car as the rain drummed softly above us. Inside the envelope, a contract from Orion Capital. Position, Chief Financial Officer. Salary, more than double what I'd earned at Horizon. This isn't just a job, Maya said. It's a chance to build something real, transparent, fair, a place where people like you get what they deserve. Through the rain-streaked glass, Horizon's tower blurred into a gray silhouette. Do you think they'll recover? I asked. Maya shrugged. Companies can rebuild. Trust rarely does. I never wanted them destroyed, I murmured. I just wanted them to change. A week later, I started at Orion Capital. On my first day, Maya walked me through the new office. Bright, open, walls of glass overlooking Lake Austin. At the entrance, a sign caught my eye. Transparency is not optional. The words made me smile. I opened my laptop and began drafting the first policy for our equal pay review, the program Maya and I had planned. Every quarter, the company's full salary report would be shared internally. No one would have to live in silence again. That afternoon, an email arrived from Leah. Rachel, the audit results are out. Ethan and Lydia are being prosecuted. The company is restructuring its entire finance division. Charles said during the board meeting, "We owe Rachel Monroe a thank you." I thought you'd want to know. I read that line again and again, not because I needed gratitude, but because it proved the truth mattered. What I did meant something, not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever stayed quiet because they thought they had no choice. That night, Maya walked in with 2 glasses of wine. "We did it," she said, raising hers. "No," I smiled. "You did it. I just stopped staying silent." "Sometimes," she said softly, "one person choosing not to stay silent is all it takes." We drank, watching the city lights shimmer through the rain. I knew I was standing at the start of something new, no longer under anyone's shadow, no longer needing to prove my worth. When I stepped out onto the balcony, the night breeze lifted my hair. Austin glowed beneath me, alive and steady. "Justice," I whispered, "is worth as much as the truth." And in that moment, I understood. Horizon could rebuild or collapse. It no longer mattered. What mattered was that I hadn't lost myself in the war I started. I had simply reclaimed what had always been mine: respect, a voice, and the quiet certainty that I was worth more than silence. A year later, autumn settled over Austin, clear and calm, as if the whole city was finally exhaling after a long year. I sat in the waiting lounge of Stanford's main auditorium, holding an embossed invitation in my hands. The words in silver italics read, "Women in Finance, Keynote Speaker, Rachel Monroe, CFO, Orion Capital." If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be here, I would have laughed. But life has its strange ways of proving that sometimes the collapse isn't the end, it's the beginning. A young assistant entered with a warm smile. "Ms. Monroe will start in 5 minutes." I nodded, stood up, and adjusted my blazer. In the mirror, the woman looking back at me wasn't the diligent employee of Horizon Dynamics anymore. The eyes were the same, but they carried a sharper light, the look of someone who had walked through fire and learned to stand tall in the ashes. Outside, the hall was packed. When I stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blurred the crowd into a sea of shifting shadows. I took a deep breath and began. "I didn't come here to tell a success story," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I came to tell a story about silence, and about the moment I chose to break it." The room fell completely still. I spoke of my journey, from a financial analyst who believed hard work was enough, to a woman who learned the hard truth that no one pays you what you're worth unless you demand it. I told them about the morning I opened that misplaced payroll file, the number 114,000 staring back at me, the cold confrontation with Ethan Cole, and the sleepless nights I spent writing The Price of Loyalty. "I used to think I was loyal," I said, "but I was just afraid of change, afraid of losing the place I'd built, afraid of being seen as the troublemaker, until I realized that fear was the very chain keeping me small." A few people nodded. Some took notes. Others just watched, silent and intent. I won't tell you it was easy. When I spoke up, I was isolated, threatened, smeared, labeled a traitor. But the only thing worse than being fought against is knowing you're right and staying silent anyway. I paused for a breath, then smiled. And when I lost everything, I finally found myself. The applause started softly, then grew until it filled the hall. I waited for the sound to fade before closing with what had been sitting in my heart for months. If I could tell my 26-year-old self one thing, it would be this: don't let them pay you with silence. Because silence is never rewarded with fairness, only with forgetting. The entire room rose to its feet. The applause thundered through the hall. I looked down at the front row where Maya sat watching me, her eyes warm and proud. After the session, students surrounded me. One young woman, her eyes red from tears, said she was thinking of quitting accounting because she felt invisible in her own work. I held her hand and told her softly, "You're not invisible. You just haven't spoken loud enough for them to hear you yet." When the crowd thinned, I stepped outside. The air smelled of dry leaves, and the sunlight filtered through tall trees. I unlocked my phone. A new message appeared from Leah. Horizon Dynamics has completed its restructuring. I've been appointed interim CFO. Charles announced the new transparent compensation policy company-wide. I just wanted to say thank you. Without you, none of this would have started. I read it again and again, my throat tightening. Leah, the young analyst who once trembled as she sent me that first piece of evidence, was now the one continuing the fight. I sat down on a stone bench, looking toward the sunlit buildings in the distance. Maya called. Her voice was bright with joy. "I just watched your talk. Stanford wants to feature it on their official channel. Do you realize you just inspired thousands of women?" I smiled softly. "I just told the truth, Maya. Maybe the world just needed to hear it differently." "You didn't just tell it," she said. "You made them believe they could too." We were quiet for a moment, listening to the wind through the line. Then Maya spoke again, slower this time. "You know, sometimes I think the justice you found wasn't just for you. You turned it into a light for others." I looked up at the clear blue sky. The sunlight shimmered across the buildings. "Justice is never perfect," I said. "But if it helps someone else stand up, then it's enough." That afternoon on my way home, I stopped by Congress Bridge. The surface of Lady Bird Lake glowed under the fading sun. Austin was still busy, cars still honking, but to me, everything felt strangely quiet. I thought back to the day I left Horizon, the heaviness of walking away from that glass tower for the last time. Now that the weight was gone, replaced by the calm of someone who had finished the journey. I didn't need their recognition. I just needed to know I hadn't betrayed myself. The wind carried the scent of coffee from a cafe nearby. I smiled and whispered, not to anyone, just to the wind, the water, and to myself. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to win. It's to walk away with your dignity intact. I stood up and walked into the sunset, leaving behind the noise, the meetings, the numbers, and an old chapter of my life. Ahead of me stretched a quiet, sunlit road, open, steady, and new. I knew life would throw more battles my way, but this time I would never stay silent again. Because now I understand, knowing your worth isn't selfish. It's the only way to truly live.